taught us that the heart is so much more powerful than the brain itself. And now that this information is trickling down, even though it has been public for years, but it's barely getting into the mainstreams, I would say within the last 5 years or so, on how important or how powerful the heart actually is. So when I say magnetically powerful, I want you to think about a net, a web almost of energy. And so if we don't focus on this energetic net, then it can get really dirty. It can stay shrunk. It can stay tight. It can stay compressed. And I believe that we would slow down the process of how fast information is traveling through that net. There is something called a torus that surrounds every single living organism, like every organism in our body, flowers, trees, the earth, the universe, planets, everything has this torus. It's called a toroidal field. This is a magnetic, an energetic field that is pushing out information, and it's moving in circles energetically, and information that we push out from the heart is immediately coming back into the heart. Our heart itself has the biggest torus energetic field. Some hearts have been measured to have a field that stretches 5 miles. 5 miles. Isn't that incredible? And I believe that we fully don't understand the complete power of this. Maybe scientists do, but I think collectively through mainstream, we don't fully understand. I'm piecing all of this together from my personal understanding of manifesting, of healing, and what I am gathering from research that I'm reading. I'm working on filling all these gaps and trying to process all of this information. Now, I haven't read this anywhere, but it would make sense to me that someone that is much more connected to the heart has a torus field that can stretch out much, much further than someone that has really no connection to the heart, meaning that there are a ton of blockages that are keeping us from expanding the energy that is in our heart. I would highly encourage you to explore this torus field so that you can see exactly how it works, but it has a hollow center, and that hollow center, let's just use the heart for example, since this is the most powerful example that we currently have. It's hollow in the center, so it would be hollow energy streaming through the center of our heart, and then it goes into huge circles that creates this beautiful sphere-like, imagine a donut. It's kind of like a donut, and so the energy is flowing out and around. It is said to be flowing out of our head and then around into our feet. So now imagine something that can be stretched out to 5 miles, which I believe, like I said, that it can be much bigger than that. And I'll tell you why I believe that in a minute. Here's what I think. As this energy is pushing up out of our heart, I think that once it reaches our head, we have the ability to block that. Sometimes we are sitting in complete inspiration and we have this guided energy where our heart is like, you need to start this spiritual podcast and it needs to be called Let There Be Luz, and you're going to share this message. As I'm feeling that inspiration and setting this intention, because this podcast was once an intention, it feels so good. I'm expanding and the energy is stretching, but there is a possibility that it can get stuck in my head. Who do you think you are starting a podcast? Who do you think you are talking about spirituality? You can't talk about these things. Meanwhile, my heart is telling me you don't have to look for anything outside of yourself. But our heads, which is tied to the ego, is constantly telling us to achieve things that belong outside of us. Go get that house. Go get that car. Go chase that dream. The thought of even chasing something is the incorrect way of thinking. It already exists. and can be completely located inside of our hearts. Source is giving us everything we need, and the only thing we need to do is trust the heart. This means we'd have to go in complete contradiction of what our head is telling us. And what is our head telling us? Don't contradict me. You will be in trouble. You can lose your home. You can lose your car. You can lose your security. You'll be homeless. It feeds us fear day in and day out. The work and the practice that we have to do is to constantly move our energy that's coming out of our heart, push past the fear where our head is, where it's limiting its potential to fully expand in ways that we can't begin to comprehend. That is the work. I'm going to shift gears now. We're going to take a short break. Let's process the first half of this episode. Let's think about it. If you need to pause this first half and think about it even further, please do so. When we come back, I'm going to talk to you about healings and how I feel all of this is tied together.
Return to the one. Return to the one.
I have been practicing energetic healings for not too long, but 2 years long, and I have been learning so much in the process. You all know I've talked about this before. I have completely shifted the way I heal. I see it completely different for me. Learning pranic healing and getting certified at that first level was extremely, extremely helpful in the work that I am now currently doing. As I was practicing this craft, I quickly learned that if I explored in this realm, I had the potential to make personal breakthroughs and strides in the way that I heal. And so I receive messages when I heal, and I can see the blockages and energies in completely different ways than I was taught originally. I decided to honor my heart and honor this intuitive energy and practice it the way I felt called to practice it. Again, this is moving completely away from my head, in where my head is telling me you need to get certified at the second level of pranic, you need to be under this teacher, you need to learn from this person, and instead my heart said, no, we have something unique here for you, and this is the area where you need to be practicing in, trusting your intuitive understanding and moving from this space. And so I did exactly that, and I began to receive unique messages, each message, of course, different because every single client is different and every single client is moving through a different type of block. This became more and more powerful as I continued to trust my heart. With the permission of my client, I wanted to share a really powerful story just so you can understand more and more about the type of work I am doing, so that if you feel called to come and work with me, and I say work with me because this is two ways. It's not just me by myself, but I also need for my clients to be 100% committed to the work that they are trying to clear out of their energetic field, out of their bodies, utilizing source energy that I believe moves not only through me, but through all of us if we just believe. And so I believe that sharing this will be very helpful in making you make a decision or hearing the call that it is time for you to get a healing done with me. I'm going to share a case of a client for the purposes of this podcast. Let's just call her Sabrina. That is not her real name. The first time I worked with Sabrina was back in September. The first thing I do when I work on a client is I clear what I call the energy body. The energy body for me was like an aura. At this time, I didn't really fully understand what the torus was. I didn't know about the torus. So I clear the energy body, and in the energy body, I can a lot of times feel what's happening, but it's not until I clear that outer layer and move in towards the body that I can find other blockages that could be sitting in different parts of our body. As I cleared her energy body, as I was working through the energy body, I was immediately called to clear the third eye. And sometimes it works like this. I'm clearing the energy body, and as I clean a certain part of the energy body, I could already feel the heavy stagnant energy that is sitting in a client, and it's kind of pulsating like, you need to come here first. Help me, help me, help me. That's kind of how it feels like. And so I started to clear her third eye, cleared the area that surrounded it. And then I found it interesting because when I began to move into her body, I felt really tight, compact energy, almost like removing cubes that are extremely heavy or bricks. And I had to pull out these very dense cubes or bricks one by one. She made compartments of all of her energy. This client is actually moving towards a space where she is hyper focused on healing. So the fact that she was able to push her energy into compartments tells me how advanced she is in working with her own proper energy. And I found that very interesting. As I mentioned, every single client is completely different. I can never generalize the energy from one client to the next. And I think this is why I moved away from being taught an overall general way on how to practice pranic healing, because I found that everyone is so different. And I didn't want to water my energy and what I'm discovering here. I didn't want to water it down by implementing someone else's generalization on how to perform an energy clearing. I wanted to be sure that I listened to the calling that every single body was calling me to perform on them, and not provide them with a generic service, but more of a tailored service depending on what their bodies were needed. As I was moving these very dense cubes, I found it really interesting. When I got to her back, there were steel beams. Instead of cords, it felt like steel beams that were going perfectly down her back. And it felt like I was literally pulling out these really heavy steel beams and removing them from her body. And so that was the first energy clearing that I did on her. As I mentioned, this was back in September. After I do an energy healing, I write notes immediately after because it's fresh in my mind. It's kind of like a picture. So I just write everything I see, everything I felt, and then the next day I'll email those notes out. And then I performed another energy clearing on her in January. So I wrote the notes, I hit save, and I knew that she had previous notes from the first time I had done an energy healing on her. And I never read the older notes, most especially when so much time has gone by from September to January. It was a significant amount of time. I don't like to read old notes because, again, I don't like to be influenced. So I like to just leave the two things separate. But this time, what I noticed is that when I went to hit save, I was like, wait a minute, did the old notes delete? It kind of worried me because I do want to keep records of the work that I've done in case I ever have to reference it. And I was really confused because the first line, the first sentence of my notes was almost identical to the new notes. So then I went on to read her old notes. I was mind blown by what I found. In the new notes, I was immediately called to clear the third eye, which was the same call to action that I received on the first healing. And this time, the way I explained her energy was that it was like she had packaged her energy in little boxes that were wrapped. There were neat little boxes that were wrapped. It wasn't like the healing in September where I was removing bricks, but she was still putting all her energy in compartments. I described it to her as like when you have a housekeeper and you tidy up before the housekeeper comes. That's kind of how it felt. I did not remember the first time I worked with her. I don't remember specific details like that when I work on my clients ever, because I heal so many people that everything just kind of collapses and begins to blur. I was truly mind blown as I continued to read on the parallels of her first energy clearing versus the second one. Also, on the second one, I described that on her back, I removed caps, like bottle caps, but really wide bottle caps that were running all the way down her back. And when I was reading her old notes, it tripped me out because I was like, oh my gosh, in the first one I was removing like steel beams. But in this one, it was just like caps, like a cap that you would almost see on a steel beam. I was taken back. She's a pretty quiet client. She internalizes a lot and she does a lot of self-reflection. She doesn't really share too much. You know, I knew that she was processing it, but for me, it moved me in so many ways because I was just mind blown. I did another healing on her in February. She continued the work with me, and this time I could feel almost like black clouds that were compacted. So they were no longer the weight of like a gift box. It was so easy to clear out because it was just literally like a swipe of the hand and the cloud would dissipate and I was easy to remove. When I got down to her sex center, to her vagina area, her uterus, her womb, when I got down to that part, I have to be honest, I was shocked. Because this client was so neat about the way she stored her energy, I was shocked with the energy that I found in her sex center. It felt like tar, very thick tar. It felt like a very sticky consistency. I was there working for a really long time. And as I was working there, of course, I had remembered her situation. It was very fresh in my mind because now it's imprinted. Her story is imprinted. Her healing is imprinted in my soul. And so as I'm cleaning up, I'm just so surprised at how different this energy is. And as I was cleaning it, I thought this feels like it has been buried by bricks. And essentially it had. It had been buried by bricks. She had constructively suppressed and hidden something that needed to come out and be released. When I worked on the back of her spine, again, it was very easy to clear the energy from there, but there was something really interesting that happened. I went in to work on her head. I love working on the head. It's probably one of my favorite places to work because I can set really positive intentions in this space and clear energy that's not serving. And as I was clearing it, I saw like a file. And when I saw the file, I saw her grab the file. And I was like, give me the file. And she was like, no, this is the way my mind works, you guys. I know this sounds crazy. She said no. And I said, let it go. Let the file go. You want to keep this? Or are you ready to let it go? And she finally released the file and I removed it, helped her release it. The next morning, I was really surprised. She reached out. She said she had a really bad migraine, that she couldn't even think straight. You know, I could feel it. I could feel her energy as she emailed me. I had a split second where I thought to myself, I could perform another healing right now and help her through this migraine. And there was a bigger part of me that stopped me and said, no, she has to work through this. You can't pull her out of this. If you pull her out of this, you are not serving her in the way that you're supposed to be serving her. I immediately reacted and I was like, there's something here. I need you to tell me when your migraines started. And so we had a brief conversation. She said they started when I was a teenager, and I told her, I want you to go back and think about what happened to you when you were a teenager, when these migraines started. And I want you to see if there's a correlation between the tar energy that I removed from your uterus and these migraines. What happened at that time in your life? She came back with a story that she had never told anyone, and I'm not going to share it here because it's not necessary for me to share the story, but she shared something very personal that she had never shared with anyone ever in her life, that she had essentially really buried under bricks, and she did such a good job of burying it that, you know, it was hard for me to find the first time around and even the second, but slowly and surely we were getting there. We were able to release it. I gave her an exercise on what to do so that we can properly move through releasing it. And it was such a powerful experience, not just for her, but also very validating for me and the importance of the type of work that's taking place. And it also gives me so much gratitude that I listened to my heart and didn't get swept away by, I needed to go get this other certification. I went on and moved forward on how to expand my awareness and my ability by trusting my own intuition. I wanted to share this powerful story because of what I'm learning with the Taurus, and I feel that all of this is connected. I can see how some Tauruses are not working effectively and efficiently, and why we're having such a hard time manifesting things or coming up on blocks, because there's energy that needs to be cleared out. And if it wasn't for her dedication to getting these energy clearings and trusting herself that she needed to make this type of investment in the way that she was, we wouldn't have been able to identify this. This is where I want to move back into this magnetic energy field that we have, in that it has so many blockages that have been implemented on us by society and by our ego, by the way we have been developing essentially our ego for generations and generations and generations. And it's not until now that we're fully understanding that it's the heart that we need to work on. Now, I want to make this really clear. I do not think that anyone needs to come to me to find this sort of release or go to any other person that identifies as being a healer. Here's what I do think, that some of us are carrying so many blockages, in which I can understand, because I was carrying these blockages myself with all of the pain and the karmic card that we recently discovered with Esoteric Essa and all of that dark energy. It's taken work for me to get to where I am. It's taken so much work, and I could have easily ignored the signs to walk a spiritual path. I could have gotten constrained by the fears that society was trying to implement on me, but I didn't. I do believe that some of us do have energetic healing power. I do believe that my Taurus, is not as clear or large. I think it won't be as clear and as large as I'd like it to be until the day that I die, because this is a journey and this is a process. I have to continue to identify blocks that I am personally carrying and clear those blocks. I do feel that I have strong energetic power that does contain healing energy, and I believe that not just because I believe it, which is the only thing that matters. The only thing that matters is how I feel about myself. But my belief is sustained by my listeners, it's sustained by you, it's sustained by people that I come in contact with that constantly tell me positive affirmations about my light and the energy that I carry. So I know this. With that said, I wanted to reference an episode that I listened to on Oprah's podcast, Super Soul Conversations, with Larry Dossey. It's called The Extraordinary Healing Power of Ordinary Things, and it was released on January 22nd. I just listened to it recently and I was mind blown, and not really mind blown, like it just confirmed what all of us already know, is the power of prayer and how important it is. Larry Dossey was a practicing doctor who read a study about the power of prayer and how it can actually heal patients. And he could not deny the study. He wasn't a person that believed in God. He grew up in a very Christian home and wanted to move completely away from that. And so when he came up on these studies, he was shocked. And because he was such an ethical person, he began to pray for his patients. And he began to see his patients heal in ways that he was not able to heal them prior. Can you imagine the power of doctors implementing practices like pranic healing? It's incredible. I currently have a client that I've been working with for 2 months now, and she is a practicing doctor who works specifically on the gut. It gave me the chills when she told me she was a doctor. She also received an associate level 1 of pranic healing. And so she's colliding both of these worlds. I think it is so admirable. And I definitely think that that is the direction we're moving in as healers. We're not just showing up as someone that has a podcast or practices pranic healing, but we're showing up in different places. And I think it is absolutely beautiful. Oprah in this podcast asked 2 important questions. The first one one was, does it matter how far someone is from the person that's praying? And the second one was, does it matter how many people are praying? The doctor went on to say that it doesn't matter the distance, that we have the ability to connect. And you all know I believe that because all of my healings are at a distance and I connect and I stand in that power. The second question, which was, does it matter how many people? So if we get more people to pray, will that person heal faster? And he went on to say, no, it doesn't. It doesn't work that way. The way it works is that you have to have someone with a strong intention to want to heal you, a pure intention to want to heal you. He went on to mention how he believes in healers, and he believes that you can come in contact with people that naturally have healing energy and want to restore you. It's just part of their energetic field. That struck a chord with me because I completely identify with the idea of that. Not that I identify myself as that, because I am not that. I really truly believe that I'm just being used because I'm allowing myself to be used and I'm allowing myself to be of service to the community because that's what I feel like I've been called to do. And so I found it so astonishing, to say the least, on the power of all of this and how it collides. All of this meaning trying to manifest from the heart, clearing that energy, not trying to manifest from the brain, because when you're doing that, that torus field of the brain is so much smaller and you can't reach the potential that you are destined to reach. You have to tap down into the heart. In one of the abundance episodes, I told you how I was now fully allowing for my heart to guide and for my brain to shut up and be the servant of the heart. Be in assistance of the heart. What does my heart need, brain? My heart needs this. Okay, go tackle that. I'm fully concentrated on expanding the heart. And I have to say that it is not something that is easy. It's not something that's like a light switch. It is and it isn't. Once you get it, it is like a light switch in the sense that that knowledge will begin to expand, and as you continue working in it, it will become clearer and clearer and clearer to you. But you do have to work through blockages because remember, we have been programmed to live in fear from the time we were very little. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. This is something that I was really being called to convey. I'm always here to be of service for you. March energy healings are now live on my website. So if you're being called to do something like this, if you're wanting to have some sort of guidance or assistance through the healing journey, you can click on the link in my bio and that will take you straight to that. I also have my energy healings accessible on Patreon. It's the same exact karmic investment. The only difference is that you receive a ton of extra content that you can ingest. Also, thank you to the new wave of Patreon contributors that have joined this month. I see you. I love you so much. Your support means so much to me. If you enjoy the content that I'm creating, if it's moved you in any way and you want to give back karmatically, an easy way to do that is to head over to iTunes, give us a 5-star review, write a rating. I appreciate it so much, and may the light within grow stronger.
Return to the one.